The twin suns of Kepler 442 cast an amber glow through the massive, transparent aluminum windows of Nova Station, the largest trading hub in the Outer Rim territories. Merchant ships from dozens of worlds docked at the rotating station's ports, their hulls gleaming with exotic metals and energy shields that shimmered like soap bubbles in space. Officer Krul adjusted his tactical vest as he walked the bustling commercial deck, his reptilian eyes scanning the crowd with practiced suspicion. His partner Vex followed close behind, both saurians towering over most other species at nearly 7 feet tall. Their scaled green skin caught the artificial lighting, and their forked tongues flicked out occasionally to taste the recycled air. 4 chemical traces. Another busy cycle, Vex muttered in their native clicking language, watching a group of blue-skinned Andorians haggle with a 4-armed Tethan merchant over a shipment of quantum crystals. Too many different species in one place makes security complicated. Krul nodded, his clawed hand resting on his plasma stunner. The weapon could drop most humanoids in seconds, though it took higher settings for the more resilient species. The humans are the worst, he said, switching to basic standard so the nearby aliens could understand. No respect for authority. Think they own the galaxy just because they discovered faster-than-light travel a few decades ago. Near the central plaza, where vendors sold everything from Martian coffee to crystallized music from the gas giants, a young woman knelt beside an open maintenance panel. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore the standard-issue gray coveralls of station engineering staff. A heavy toolkit sat beside her, filled with quantum resonators, plasma welders, and molecular scanners that hummed, with barely contained energy. Jiwoo wiped sweat from her forehead as she carefully adjusted the plasma flow regulator inside the panel. The station's artificial gravity generators had been acting up all week, creating random fluctuations that made some sections feel like walking on a trampoline, while others felt like swimming through thick syrup. Her scanner beeped softly, indicating the magnetic field alignments were finally stabilizing. "Excuse me, citizen," came a harsh voice behind her. She looked up to see 2 massive reptilian forms blocking out the overhead lights. Their yellow eyes stared down at her with obvious disdain, and she could smell the distinctive metallic scent that saurians gave off when they were agitated. "Yes, officers?" Jiwoo stood slowly, brushing dust off her knees. "Is there a problem?" Krul's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air around her. "What are you doing with that equipment? These tools look expensive. Where did you steal them?" "I didn't steal anything," Jiwoo replied calmly, pulling her identification card from her chest pocket. The small device displayed her credentials in holographic text that floated in the air between them. "I'm Jiwoo Han, Senior Quantum Systems Engineer. I work here." Vex snatched the ID card before she could react, his claws clicking against the metal surface. "Humans and their fake documents," he sneered. "This could be programmed by any street hacker on Titan Station." Around them, other species began to notice the confrontation. A family of tall, gray-skinned ethereals whispered among themselves in their musical language, while a group of mechanical synthetics observed with their glowing optical sensors. Even the usually aggressive Krogans stopped their arm wrestling contest to watch what was happening. "Officers, please check your station database," Jiwoo said, her voice remaining steady despite the growing crowd. "My clearance codes are updated daily. I've been working on the gravity stabilizer issues that have been—" "Shut up," Krul interrupted, grabbing her arm with enough force to leave marks. "Another human scavenger trying to talk her way out of trouble. You people are all the same." The he. Toolkit made a metallic scraping sound as Vex kicked it, sending precision instruments scattering across the deck plating. Several expensive quantum resonators cracked against the wall, their internal energy cells sparking dangerously. A nearby Centaurian merchant jumped back as blue electricity arced between the broken pieces. "Hey, easy there," called out Brack, a friendly Krogani trader who'd been watching the scene unfold. His rocky orange skin was marked with traditional war paint, but his voice carried concern rather than aggression. "That equipment cost more than my cargo hauler. Maybe you should scan her ID properly before—" "Mind your own business, Rockhead," Vex snarled, his hand moving to his weapon. "Unless you want to join her in detention." Jiwoo winced as Krul's claws dug deeper into her arm. She could feel her engineering badge pressing against her ribs, the small device containing not just her identification, but also emergency access codes to the station's critical systems. If something went wrong with the quantum drives or life support, she was one of only 3 people qualified to fix it. "This is a mistake," she said quietly, looking directly into Krul's yellow eyes. Ambassador Do-hyun briefed all security personnel about rising tensions between species. This kind of behavior is exactly what he warned would cause problems. The mention of the human diplomat made both Saurians exchange glances. Do-hyun Kim had indeed given several presentations about cultural sensitivity, but most of the non-human security staff had dismissed his warnings as typical human overreaction. "The ambassador isn't here," Krul hissed, beginning to drag Jiwoo toward the security checkpoint. "And you're coming with us for questioning." As they moved through the crowd, Jiwoo noticed several things her engineering mind automatically catalogued. The overhead lights flickered in a pattern that suggested power grid instability. The artificial gravity felt slightly weaker in certain sections, indicating the stabilizers she'd been repairing weren't fully operational yet. Most concerning of all, her portable scanner was picking up unusual energy signatures from the security sector itself. The end. The security holding area deep within Nova Station's core section hummed with the constant vibration of massive fusion reactors. Jiwoo sat on the narrow metal bench in her detention cell, watching the energy readings scroll across a wall-mounted display through the transparent aluminum barrier. The numbers told a story that made her engineer's mind race with possibilities, none of them good. Captain Minho prowled back and forth in front of her cell like a caged predator. His scaled hide was a darker shade of green than his subordinates, marked with the ritual scars that indicated his rank among the Saurian military hierarchy. Each movement was calculated to intimidate, his clawed feet clicking against the polished deck plating with mechanical precision. "Human scavenger caught. With stolen equipment," he dictated to his voice recorder, the small device floating beside his head like a metallic insect. "Suspect claims to be station engineer, but identification appears falsified. Recommend immediate deportation to prevent further incidents." "Those aren't stolen tools," Jiwoo said calmly, not bothering to look away from the energy display. "They're standard-issue quantum engineering equipment. Serial numbers should match your procurement database." Minho's yellow eyes narrowed as he leaned closer to the barrier. "Humans always have an answer for everything. Your species thinks you're so clever with your primitive technology and emotional responses." In the evidence locker across the corridor, Jiwoo could see her toolkit spread across a metal table. Officer Vex was poking at her quantum resonators with obvious disgust, treating the precision instruments like children's toys. Each device was worth more than most people earned in a year, capable of manipulating matter at the subatomic level to repair everything from hull breaches to failing life support systems. "Look at this junk," Vex called out, holding up her molecular scanner. The device was smaller than his clawed hand, but contained computing power that exceeded most Starship navigation systems. Humans build everything so fragile. Saurian technology lasts for centuries. "That junk can detect quantum fluctuations across 17 dimensions," Jiwoo replied. "Fair's also picking up some interesting readings from your security grid right now. Several levels above them, in the engineering section of Nova Station, Hiram paused in her work on the gravity stabilizer control panel. The massive chamber around her stretched for hundreds of meters, filled with humming machinery that kept the rotating station's artificial gravity functioning properly. Tubes of glowing plasma snaked between towering processors, and the air itself shimmered with barely contained energy fields. She checked her wrist communicator for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Jiwoo should have reported back from the commercial deck repairs hours ago. The quantum drive calibration couldn't wait much longer. Ships were already complaining about docking difficulties as the station's gravitational field fluctuated unpredictably. "Station, control to Engineering Bay 7, came a voice through the overhead speakers. "We have 3 Centaurian cargo haulers requesting emergency docking. Their magnetic clamps can't get a stable lock." Hiram activated her headset microphone. "Engineering Bay 7 to control. I need 10 more minutes to complete the gravity stabilizer sequence. Can you route them to the backup docking ports?" negative Bay 7. Backup ports are experiencing the same instability. We need those stabilizers online now. She looked at the complex control interface before her, dozens of quantum processors working in harmony to maintain the delicate balance that kept everyone's feet on the deck. Jiwoo was the specialist for this particular system. Hyerim knew the theory, but her partner understood the practical applications in ways that textbooks couldn't teach. Back in the detention cell, Jiwoo watched the energy readings with growing concern. The patterns were too regular to be random equipment failures, too subtle to be obvious sabotage. Someone was deliberately manipulating the station's power grid in ways that most engineers wouldn't even notice. Your quantum drives are operating at 93% efficiency, she said to Captain Minho, who was still pacing in front of her cell. That's actually impressive for a station this size, but you're experiencing systematic power drains every 4 hours and 17 minutes. Minho stopped pacing and stared at her. How could you possibly know that? Because I helped design the monitoring systems, Jiwoo replied, pointing at the wall display. Those fluctuations aren't random. Someone's routing power to unauthorized systems on a regular schedule. The energy signature suggests transporters operating without proper clearance. Officer Krul emerged from a side corridor, carrying a steaming cup of something that smelled like burned metal. Captain, the humans. Story checks out partially. She does have engineering credentials, but they could still be forged. Even if they're real, Vex added, joining them with Jiwoo's disassembled scanner in his hands. Humans lie constantly. It's part of their primitive emotional nature. The three Saurians laughed among themselves, a sound like grinding stone that echoed off the detention area's metal walls. They were so focused on their shared joke that they didn't notice Jiwoo quietly observing their security monitors, her trained eye cataloguing every detail of their surveillance network. The irony wasn't lost on her. While they mocked human emotions and intelligence, she was using both to uncover what appeared to be a serious security breach. The power drain patterns suggested someone was operating illegal transporters, possibly moving contraband or even people without proper documentation. Ormao. The wall display. Another energy spike registered exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes after the previous one. This time Jiwoo noticed something else. The spike coincided with a brief disruption in the detention area's own surveillance grid. For exactly 37 seconds, the cameras monitoring the holding cells would show static. Someone was very carefully covering their tracks, and they had inside access to the security systems. The detention cell's walls hummed with a low frequency that most species couldn't hear, but Jiwoo's human ears picked up the subtle vibration. She'd been sitting in the same position for 3 hours, watching the energy monitoring displays that the Saurian guards had foolishly left within her line of sight. To them, the scrolling numbers and wavelength patterns were just background noise. To her, they told a story more fascinating than any mystery novel. Every 4 hours and 17 minutes, like clockwork, a power surge rippled through Nova Station's quantum grid. The spike lasted exactly 37 seconds, drawing energy from the main reactors before redistributing it through auxiliary systems. Most engineers would dismiss it as routine maintenance or normal fluctuation in a station this size. But Jiwoo noticed something the others had missed. The power wasn't being redistributed randomly. It was being channeled through specific conduits that led directly to the security sector's transporter bay. She closed her eyes and visualized the station's layout in her mind, a three-dimensional blueprint she'd memorized during her first week on the job. The main transporter systems were located in the civilian sections, heavily monitored and logged for safety. But the security department had their own emergency transport network, designed for rapid deployment of officers during crisis situations. Guard, she called softly to the young Saurian officer stationed outside her cell. His name tag read Kelv in both standard and Saurian script. Could you look at those energy readings for a moment? Kelv barely glanced up from his entertainment device, which was displaying some kind of Saurian combat sport, involving large reptilian creatures fighting with plasma weapons. What about them, human? The quantum fluctuations happen every 4 hours and 17 minutes, Jiwoo explained, pointing at the wall display. That's not a natural cycle for fusion reactors. Someone's manually triggering those power drains. Maintenance schedules, Kelv replied dismissively, his attention returning to the violent sport on his screen. Two armored lizards were now wrestling over a glowing energy sword, while a crowd of spectators cheered in their clicking language. Jiwoo studied the young guard's profile. He was probably new to the security force, still following orders without questioning them. His scales had the bright coloration of youth, and his claws hadn't yet developed the wear patterns that came with years of handling weapons and equipment. "Kelv," she said gently, "how long have you been working security?" 6 months, he replied automatically, then caught himself. "Why do you care, human?" "Because in 6 months you've probably never seen the transporter logs for the security department, have you?" This got his attention. Kelv's yellow eyes narrowed as he looked at her with suspicion. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact." Jiwoo leaned forward, her voice calm but urgent. "Those power spikes are happening because someone is using unauthorized transporters. The energy signature is consistent with matter stream transmission, probably moving cargo, or people without proper documentation." On the wall display, another spike began to register. Jiwoo watched the numbers climb, her engineer's mind automatically calculating power consumption rates. "There," she said, pointing at the screen. "Transporter activation. Someone just beamed. Something or someone off this station." Kelv glanced at the display, then back at his entertainment device. "You're making things up. Humans always create conspiracy theories when they're in trouble." "Check the security logs," Jiwoo suggested. "Cross-reference the power spikes with transporter activity. I bet you'll find gaps in the official records." "I'm not falling for human tricks," Kelv muttered. But she noticed he wasn't looking at his screen anymore. His scaled fingers drummed nervously against his weapon belt. 3 hours later, Captain Minho returned to the detention area with Officers Krul and Vex. They were carrying portable energy scanners, the kind used to detect illegal modifications. Tau starship systems. Minho's expression was darker than usual, his ritual scars seeming deeper in the artificial lighting. "Human," he growled, stopping in front of Jiwoo's cell. "We've been monitoring your communications. You've been trying to corrupt our junior officers with false information." "I've been trying to warn you about a security breach," Jiwoo replied. "The fluctuations are coming from your own security grid. Someone's using the power disruptions to mask illegal transport signatures." Vex laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. "Another ignorant human trying to sound important. You think you understand our systems better than we do?" "I helped design the monitoring protocols," Jiwoo said simply. "The quantum signature analysis, the power distribution algorithms, the safety interlocks that prevent unauthorized transporter use. I know what normal looks like, and this isn't it." Krul activated his scanner and pointed it at the wall display. "These readings are within normal parameters for a station this size. Your human eyes see patterns that don't exist." "Then explain the 37-second surveillance gaps," Jiwoo countered. "Every time there's a power spike, your security cameras show static for exactly 37 seconds. That's not coincidence. That's coordination." The 3 Saurians exchanged glances, their reptilian features unreadable to human eyes. But Jiwoo caught the subtle body language, the way Minho's tail twitched, how Vex's claws clicked against his scanner, the slight dilation of Krul's pupils. They knew something was wrong. They just didn't want to admit that a human prisoner had figured it out before they did. "Even if you're right," Minho said finally, "it doesn't matter. You're still under arrest for equipment theft and trespassing in restricted areas." "I wasn't trespassing," Jiwoo replied. "I was fixing the gravity stabilizers in the commercial district, but while I've been sitting here, I've traced the sabotage pattern back to its source." She stood up slowly, moving to the transparent aluminum barrier that separated her from the guards. "The unauthorized transporter activity isn't random. It's being coordinated by someone with administrative access to the security systems, someone who can schedule power drains, disable surveillance, and falsify logs." "That's impossible," Vexi protested. "Only department heads have that level of access." Jiwoo met his yellow eyes steadily. "Exactly." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant hum of the station's reactors, and the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. On the wall display, the energy readings continued their relentless scroll, painting a picture of corruption that ran deeper than any of them had imagined. The detention area's main door hissed open with mechanical precision, and Ambassador Taehyung strode through, flanked by 2 human security escorts. His diplomatic uniform was pristine despite the urgency of his arrival. Dark blue fabric with silver threading that caught the overhead lights. Behind him followed a floating diplomatic drone, its sensors already recording everything for the E. Official record. Captain Minho. Taehyung's voice carried the authority of someone used to negotiating with hostile alien governments. I demand the immediate release of Senior Engineer Ji-woo Han. Her detention violates 3 separate interspecies agreements regarding the treatment of technical personnel. Minho's scaled form seemed to expand as he faced the human diplomat, his yellow eyes glowing with barely contained aggression. Ambassador, this human was caught with stolen equipment and has been spreading false information about station security. She remains in detention pending investigation. Stolen equipment? Taehyung's eyebrows rose as he gestured toward the evidence table where Ji-woo's tools lay scattered. Those are standard-issue quantum engineering instruments. I can provide purchase orders and maintenance records dating back 2 years. From her cell, Ji-woo watched the confrontation with growing concern. Not for herself, but for what she'd discovered hidden in the station's data streams. While the officers had been mocking human technology, she'd been using her supposedly primitive equipment to uncover something far more dangerous than anyone realized. Ambassador, she called out, her voice cutting through the heated exchange between Taehyung and Minho. You need to evacuate the civilian sections immediately. The quantum regulators are failing. Taehyung turned toward her cell, his diplomatic mask slipping for just a moment to reveal genuine concern. What are you talking about? Show them, Ji-woo said to the air, and suddenly the wall displays around the detention area flickered to life with data streams she'd been secretly accessing. Numbers scrolled past in cascading waterfalls of information, energy readings that painted a picture of systematic sabotage spanning months. Officer Vex stepped back in shock. How is she doing that? We confiscated her equipment. Ji-woo smiled grimly. You confiscated the obvious equipment, but you missed the neural interface implant behind my left ear, standard for quantum engineers working in high radiation environments. While you've been insulting human technology, I've been using it to trace every unauthorized power transfer, every falsified log entry, every illegal transport signature. The main display screen filled with a 3-dimensional map of Nova Station, showing energy flows like rivers of light through the structure's corridors. Red markers appeared at dozens of locations, highlighting unauthorized transporter activity over the past 6 months. The trafficking ring has been operating for half a year, Ji-woo continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. Someone with administrative access has been using power fluctuations to mask illegal transports, weapons to rebel factions, rare minerals from protected worlds, even sentient beings sold into slavery. Ambassador Taehyung's face had gone pale as he studied the evidence streaming across the displays. The quantities here, this represents millions of credits in illegal trade. The proof shows coordination at the highest levels, Ji-woo said, highlighting specific data points with her neural interface. Transport schedules, security override codes, surveillance blackouts, all requiring department head authorization. Captain, Minho's claws extended involuntarily as he stared at the evidence. This is fabricated data, human lies designed to create chaos. Then explain this, Ji-woo said, and the display switched to surveillance footage from the security department's own cameras. The timestamp showed the previous night, and the video clearly depicted Minho himself operating an unauthorized transporter, moving sealed containers marked with symbols from the Outer Rim's most notorious criminal cartels. Officer Krul drew his weapon instinctively, but Taehyung's security escorts were faster. The 2 humans moved with military precision, their plasma rifles trained on the Saurian officers, before anyone could react. Stand down, Taehyung ordered, his diplomatic authority now backed by the threat of force. This is now a matter of interstellar law enforcement. But as the confrontation reached its peak, a deep rumble shook the station's superstructure. The lights flickered, and warning klaxons began wailing throughout the facility. Emergency messages flooded the communication channels in dozens of languages as artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. "What's happening?" Vex demanded, his reptilian features showing the first signs of real fear. Jiwoo's interface flickered with incoming data from the station's critical systems. Her expression turned grim as she processed the information. "The quantum regulators are cascading. All those unauthorized power drains have destabilized the containment fields around the main reactor cores." On the display screens, energy levels spiked far beyond safe parameters. The station's fusion reactors, designed to power a small city, were beginning to lose containment. If the magnetic bottles that held the superheated plasma failed completely, the resulting explosion would vaporize everything within 100,000 kilometers. "Estimated time to total containment failure," the station's computer announced in its maddeningly calm synthetic voice. 47 minutes and 36 seconds. Throughout Nova Station, emergency evacuation procedures activated automatically. Glass doors sealed critical sections, while transport ships in the docking bays fired their engines, desperate to reach minimum safe distance. But with nearly 1 million beings aboard the massive structure, there wasn't enough time or ships to evacuate everyone. Ambassador Taehyung looked from the streaming data to Jiwoo's cell, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You can fix this." "Maybe," Jiwoo replied, her engineer's mind already calculating possibilities. "But I'll need access to the quantum control systems, and I'll need it now." Captain Minho stood frozen, watching his carefully constructed criminal empire crumble around him, as the station itself began to die. The irony was perfect. The same systematic sabotage that had hidden his trafficking operation was now threatening to destroy everything he'd been trying to steal. The station shuddered again, more violently this time, and emergency lighting bathed the detention area in hellish red. In the distance, they could hear the screams of panicking civilians and the roar of ships launching from docking bays. Time was running out, and only the human they'd dismissed as primitive and ignorant held the key to saving them all. The station's superstructure groaned like a dying beast as another massive tremor ripped through Nova Station's core. Emergency lighting bathed everything in crimson, and the artificial gravity fluctuated so wildly that loose objects floated momentarily before crashing back to the deck. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see ships fleeing in all directions, their engines burning bright against the starfield as they raced to escape the expanding danger zone. 39 minutes to total containment failure, the station's AI announced, its synthetic voice now carrying an edge of urgency that programmers had never intended. "All non-essential personnel report to evacuation stations immediately." Captain Minho stood frozen in the detention area, his scaled hands trembling as he watched the evidence of his crimes scroll across the displays. The trafficking operation that had made him wealthy beyond imagination was now exposed, and worse yet, his sabotage had triggered a cascade failure that threatened to kill everyone aboard the station. Officer Kelv, the young guard who had dismissed Jiwoo's warnings, looked between his captain and the human prisoner with growing understanding. "Captain," he said hesitantly, "if she can fix this, we should let her try." "She's lying," Minho snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. "Humans can't solve problems that our best engineers can't handle." Another violent shake threw everyone against the walls. This time, sparks erupted from several control panels as overloaded circuits finally gave up. In the distance, they could hear the whine of evacuation ships launching in rapid succession, but Jiwoo knew the math. With nearly 1 million beings aboard Nova Station, less than half would escape before the reactors failed. "I need those officers arrested before I start," Jiwoo said firmly, meeting Ambassador Taehyung's eyes through the cell barrier. "And I need immediate access to wherever they're holding the trafficking victims." Taehyung nodded to his security escorts, who moved with practiced efficiency. "Captain Minho, Officers Cruel and Vex, you're under arrest for conspiracy, trafficking, and sabotage. Kelv, if you weren't involved in this operation, now would be a good time to prove it." The young Saurian guard drew his weapon and pointed it at his former captain. I never knew about any trafficking, he said, his voice shaking. I just followed orders. Smart choice, Jiwoo said, as Taehyung's men secured the corrupt officers. Now open my cell and get me to the quantum control center. We have 36 minutes to save this station. The moment the barrier deactivated, Jiwoo was in motion. She grabbed her scattered tools from the evidence table, her hands moving with the speed and precision of someone who had trained for exactly this kind of emergency. The quantum resonators still functioned, despite the rough treatment, and her molecular scanner hummed to life as she calibrated it for reactor containment. Field analysis. This way, Kelv said, leading them toward the central lift that would take them to the station's core. The quantum control center is protected by emergency bulkheads, but I have override codes. As they raced through corridors filled with panicking civilians, Jiwoo's neural interface fed her constant updates on the station's deteriorating condition. The magnetic bottles containing the fusion plasma were losing cohesion at an accelerating rate. Each unauthorized power drain from Minho's trafficking operation had created microscopic stress fractures in the containment fields, and now those fractures were spreading like cracks in breaking glass. The control center was a cathedral of technology, with towering quantum processors reaching toward a curved ceiling that displayed the station's entire power grid in real-time holography. Energy flows pulsed like arteries through the three-dimensional display, showing healthy green streams turning amber with stress, then red with critical overload. The station AI can't compensate, explained Chief Engineer Borak, a massive Krogani, whose rocky orange skin was slick with perspiration. The cascade failure is happening too fast for automated systems to respond. Jiwoo plugged her neural interface directly into the primary control console, feeling the rush of data flowing through her consciousness like a digital river. Her human brain, evolved for pattern recognition and intuitive problem-solving, began processing information in ways that purely logical AI systems couldn't match. I can see the problem, she murmured, her hands dancing across holographic controls, while her mind worked through quantum mechanics equations at superhuman speed. The trafficking operation created resonance feedback loops. Every illegal transport weakened the containment fields at specific frequencies. Around her, the station's engineering crew watched in amazement as Jiwoo began rewiring critical systems in ways that defied conventional logic. She bypassed damaged circuits by routing power through life support systems, stabilized magnetic fields using the artificial gravity generators, and created entirely new control pathways through the station's communication network. That's impossible, breathed Dr. Zenith, a brilliant ethereal physicist whose gray skin had turned pale with shock. She's using the station's own rotation as a stabilizing force for the containment fields. Human intuition, Ambassador Taehyung said proudly as he watched Jiwoo work. We don't just follow the manual, we rewrite it when necessary. With 15 minutes remaining, the cascade failure began to slow. Jiwoo had isolated the damaged sections and created backup containment fields using systems that were never designed for that purpose. The station's AI, learning from her innovations, began implementing similar solutions throughout the power grid. Containment stable, the computer announced, and spontaneous cheers erupted throughout the control center. Reactor cores operating within normal parameters. But Jiwoo wasn't finished. Working with relentless focus, she traced every connection in Minho's trafficking network, unlocking hidden storage bays and revealing the true scope of the operation. Dozens of beings from across the galaxy were freed from illegal detention, their gratitude expressed in languages that spanned the known worlds. As the immediate crisis passed, Officers Kelv and the other honest security personnel approached Jiwoo with obvious embarrassment. The young Saurian guard was the first to speak, his yellow eyes downcast. "Engineer Han," he said formally, "I owe you an apology. We judged you by your species rather than your capabilities, and that nearly cost everyone their lives." Jiwoo looked around at the diverse crew of aliens who had watched her save their station. Saurians, Ethereals, Kroganis, Centaurians, and dozens of other species, all of them now looking at humans with new respect. "The important thing is that you learned from this," she replied gracefully. "Intelligent species should grow from their mistakes, not repeat them. Judge individuals by their actions, not their appearance. Within hours, the Nova Station Council convened an emergency session. Captain Minho and his conspirators were transferred to Coalition custody to face charges that would likely result in life imprisonment. The trafficking victims were provided medical care and assistance returning to their homes. Engineer Han, announced Councillor Thrak, a distinguished ethereal who served as the station's civilian administrator. The Council unanimously offers you the position of Chief Security Engineering Consultant with full authority to redesign our security protocols. Jiwoo accepted the position, knowing that her first act would be implementing mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all Coalition enforcement personnel. The galaxy was vast and diverse, filled with countless species whose differences were their greatest strength. As Nova Station resumed normal operations and ships returned to dock at the massive trading hub, word spread throughout the Outer Rim territories about the human engineer who had saved 1 million lives. The story became legend, told in cantinas and trading posts across dozens of worlds, a reminder that heroism could come from the most unexpected places. In the end, the officers who had tried to destroy a human's reputation through prejudice and corruption received exactly what they deserved, justice served by the very person they had underestimated, and Jiwoo Han became a symbol of what the galaxy could achieve when beings looked past surface differences to recognize the potential that existed in every sentient species. The end.